Hello and welcome to the video. This is how I've built and how the Maiden went of this model here. This is the AtomRC Dolphin. Now I am by no means the first person on YouTube to have a go at this plane, but I had a go of its bigger brother a couple of weeks ago, the killer whale. They all seem to be named after marine mammals. I can't wait to see this AtomRC manatee. But this is a really cool looking model. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, I did a video where I talked about initial impressions and the kind of plan for this. And I really want to have this set up as kind of an FPV combat plane. Because there is so much room inside, I can fit a flight controller in here, but also I can easily fit the little board for the FPV combat system. However, before that, we need to maiden it, get it all trimmed and tuned, and get it flying. Now, normal stuff with me, I am going to put iNav in this, or I have put iNav in it, because actually as I'm recording this, she's kind of ready to rock and roll. So I will go through all the pieces that I've used in this one here, and then I'll kind of run through the setup very briefly, and we'll see how it flies. As I'm recording this to camera right now, I haven't maidened it yet, so I genuinely have no idea how she's going to behave. The only thing I will say before we get into the parts is the motor and prop here at the back is the standard one that came with the kit. Now I think the very early kits were only 1800 kV. The motor on this is 2000, and I'm hoping that that will give an extra little bit of punch. It's a pretty reasonable prop. I've done my calculations in eCalc. Thank you to every single one of you that mentioned the setups that you were using on this. But I thought what we'll do is let's use what came in the box, right? And then we'll get the benchmark, and then we can decide from there. So enough of me waffling on, let me show you how I've quickly put this together. I'm not going to go through massive detail, because if you want to know how to set up a plane with iNav, check out the iNav for Beginners 2020 series. So the pieces that I've put inside this model, and I didn't have to worry a lot about space because there is so much room. The first one, I'm using a Maiden F411 WSE flight controller. These are great for smaller models. I happen to have one on the bench pre-flashed with iNav that was ready to rock and roll, so it was a quick and easy thing to pop it in here. Could have put a larger flight controller in, something like one of the Maiden Wing series, but as this one was ready to rock and roll, I thought we'll use it in here. GPS is the Maiden GNSS MHQ 5883 GPS and compass. I'm not going to attach the compass because this should be quick enough to not worry about a little bit of wind and that getting in the way of an accurate heading reading. Also using the Maiden VTX HV for the video transmitter. This is going to be an analog plane because I'm going to be flying with my friends who are on analog, and I want it to be pretty easy for us to get set up and all get in the air together. And also the analog system works a little bit better with the FPV combat system when I eventually get my hands on that. At the front, I've got a Foxeer Predator V4 camera, which has a really wide field of view, and that should also help me with the acquisition of my friends when we get to the combat part. Menace RC Aeropod underneath, and the FrSky X6R receiver, miles too big for a model like this. I would normally go with an RXSR or something like that for this, but because I have tons of room and I have loads of these receivers knocking around, it was a simple way to do it. Now, the way I've put it together is the standard process, but I'll go through it very quickly. First of all, tested the servos on the bench. I'm again using the stock servos. I may live to regret that decision, but they are analog and they are plastic geared. But we'll see how they survive. I can always put some metal geared ones in with some digital servos if I don't feel that it's particularly up to the job. I used a servo checker to make sure that they were fine and left them on exercise. Once they'd been exercised on the servo checker to make sure that they were okay and performing fine, then I 90-degreed them all, installed the servo horns, and then popped them into the wings with a couple of dabs of hot glue to keep them in place. Made sure the flight controller was okay with iNav and set up all the mixes and stuff that I would need exactly as I would normally do. Check out my iNav for Beginners 2020 series for all the steps that I go through. Crimped the connectors onto the GPS and connected that. Soldered the power wires to the battery onto the flight controller so I could power it, because with the flight controller I've got, things like the GPS aren't powered from the USB port. Connected the receiver and tested on the bench with iNav configurator with those basic things installed to make sure that things like the modes, the receiver was all set up, middle channel values were okay, the GPS was then finding the GPS satellites and all that good stuff. Next job then was to connect the Predator V4 camera just to a regular dumb VTX on the bench. Just use the little joystick supplied to make sure that there was nothing being shown in terms of the Foxeer logo or any of that goodness. Make sure it's set to PAL and to the right aspect ratio. 4:3 will suit the goggles that I have. Then I installed the camera at the front of the plane. I had to cut out a little bit of a recess underneath it, pop some black tape. This is the sticky back plastic that I've used on other models just to stop light reflecting into the lens, and then ran a cable all the way back and connected that to the flight controller as well. Now the little bit of foam that I cut off at the front had a nice bevel to it, so a little bit of hot glue, and I glued it behind the camera to provide a slightly more aerodynamic back to the camera, because it does kind of just stick up out of nowhere. It's one of the average things about this model is the way the camera is mounted. With those basic things in, then I need to figure out where all of the other pieces would be positioned. So I installed the motor and prop and then lay all the pieces inside of the model at the back, and then put a 1300 4S in the nose and got it to balance on the CG points just to get an idea of how much room there is. Now there is tons of room in the battery compartment, so you can have the battery right in the nose or right up against the central gravity, which gives you an awful lot of options for the battery and its placement. So I wasn't too worried, but interestingly, weighing the model when it's on the CG points with all of the parts in the back only came up to 655 grams, which is buttons for a model this size. My E-Wings Vortigaunt, when I'd finished building it, was about a kilogram heavier. So this is a lovely little lightweight model, and we'll probably Maiden it like that too. Once I'd done that, then I knew I could just kind of go and just put the other components where it made sense rather than have to worry about positioning them for central gravity. Installed the ESC into the bottom bay for airflow, and then added an extra JST lead onto the flight controller where I was soldering all of that up, because that will provide a nice handy way for me to power that FPV combat system. I like having a flying JST lead for auxiliary power. It's amazing how often it gets used for stuff. Once the model was all together, then the next job before applying power one last time was to do a full visual inspection to make sure that all of the things were plugged in where they need to be. Ground wires were going to ground pins, voltage wires were going to voltage pins, signal pins were going to the right places too. Now the cool thing is, on the Maytech site it is very easy to lay out, but I would always recommend just do a visual inspection and make sure that everything adds up. Once I was happy, I did just go into iNav and check and confirm all the settings were okay, and then check the resistance on the XT60 connector to make sure that I didn't have a dead short, and then powered the model for the first time. Then went through iNav and just made sure everything was spot on. Receiver, channels, modes, OSD layout, checked all that in the goggles, and then finally enabled the outputs and dialed in the control surface movement, and also make sure that the motor was running well, and calibrated the ESC. So with all that done, she is kind of ready to Maiden. So let's jump to the flying footage. Let's see how it goes.
Well, this is beautiful.
See if we've got. Okay, she definitely needs some up angle.
Battery 78%.
Because, yeah, she definitely knows if I let go of the stick.
Oh, that's a lot down, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, she's down a couple of degrees.
Do you need a hand with the trim, or are you alright? I'm finding it.
I'm going to do a trim. Let me get a straight and level flight.
Yeah.
Cruising at 14 miles an hour.
It's nice.
3.5 amps.
It looks amazing in
good.
the air, doesn't it? Oh, you haven't seen it, have you? No, it looks really nice in the air.
So I would say that could be a little bit more nose down.
RSSI low.
Bring it back. I would say that is probably Find a level.
Manual mode. Position hold. Altitude hold. Active.
Okay, we
On.
definitely need a trim as
Altitude
well.
hold. Off.
So let me see if I can get this so I can fly straight and level. See, now she's actually not doing bad
Yeah.
in the altitude.
Sensor lost. RSSI low.
Bring it back. Yeah, she's losing now, isn't she?
Sensor lost.
Right, let me do a trim. I love that single fluffy cloud in this one.
Yeah, you're
Right,
around
let's
it.
put it in manual mode. So now I'm in full
Sensor
manual.
lost. Manual mode.
Okay, now we're in manual. Here we go.
Yeah.
Let's actually see what she's doing.
Well, the roll rate looks good anyway, straight away. That's
Yeah, was that?
yeah.
Okay, so
Sensor lost. Sensor lost.
okay. I'm going to do a couple of lower passes so we get some good footage of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But at the moment, she is sipping the power.
What's the amps?
It's 2.72 amps.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Really?
25 miles an hour.
Sensor lost. Sensor lost.
How can that? 2 points. Surely that's.
It's got. Yeah, I'm not sure if I believe that. However,
Say that because I was going to say my Dart does more than that.
it's your Dart 4S.
No, 3S.
Right, I wonder if that's part of it. Okay, should we do a run?
Go for it.
Do a speed run.
RSSI low.
You gain some altitude first. So a couple of 100 feet. Right, we're going to do a speed run. Are we ready?
Ready.
Do it back towards us, so hopefully go over the top. Here we go, full speed.
Sensor lost. Sensor lost.
About 78, 79 miles an hour.
Sensor lost.
She's not happy about some of the sensors.
Sensor lost.
She's actually really nice. See
Yeah.
if I can do another slightly lower pass.
Crazy, man. There's a plane. It's probably only about 1,000 feet, but he's obviously well clear of us. But it is just going over the.
Good.
I don't know what it is actually.
See what the
It's a weird
yeah,
thing.
the rate the
Sensor
throws are
lost.
pretty good.
Sensor lost. Sensor lost.
Oh, shut up.
Sensor lost. Sensor lost.
Okay, I think, young man, that works. What do you think?
Definite success. Yeah. You've actually got. I
Should we do a loop?
Go on
Get
then.
some altitude.
RSSI low.
Perfect.
I might change the receiver in it because that S6R doesn't seem to be holding
Doesn't seem
very
to
well.
be,
I might
yeah,
replace it with an
yeah.
X8R.
You got to been. You got to be close to a 10-minute flight time now, haven't you?
Been up for 4.5 minutes.
Oh, is that it? Oh, all right.
That's
Okay.
it.
I thought it was longer than that, but
Sensor lost. Sensor
the.
lost.
Definitely going
Sensor lost. Sensor lost.
to change the receiver because that is kind of bugging
Yeah.
me. You get an X8R out the spares bin. But you know
Sensor
what?
lost.
That is bloody lovely.
It is really sweet, isn't it? It looks really smooth.
Sensor lost.
It is incredibly smooth.
And
it's very, very easy to fly.
You're you got good speed range as well, haven't you? You can really
Yeah.
slow it down, can't you, as well?
It'll toot along at 20 miles an hour because I'm about 41. Let me bring it in. This is the field that we're in that I'm over, isn't it? There we go.
You just come over the hedge, yeah. So
Sensor lost.
yep,
Sensor lost.
straight towards us. There's another plane, but it's way up high above us.
RSSI low.
Yeah, we're definitely changing that receiver. That's going to bug the pants out of me.
Lovely, lovely,
Sensor
jubbly.
lost.
So there we have it. It flies, and it flies very, very well. Now, in that video, I actually launched in stabilized mode, just to give me a hand with the torque roll that was coming from it. And as soon as I had it trimmed in manual mode, thanks to iNav, I was flying in manual and it was beautifully stable. Now, admittedly, it was a very nice day for a Maiden. There was a little puff of wind and the sky and the sun was amazing. And I could have stayed up there for a long time. But big thanks again to my flying buddy Adam, who was there as my cap camera and my spotter. So this, for me, gets 5 painless stars. This is fantastic. Not only does it look fab, it flies incredibly well as well. Now, in terms of the setup tips, there's only a couple of things to talk about here. It does need a little bit of up elevator, potentially, and a little bit of aileron to combat the torque roll, particularly on takeoff. But I now took care of that on the initial launch. You do need 100% throttle to launch it. You just give it full beans and give it a chuck, and if it's trimmed, it'll just be away. It definitely had a nose down tendency. So the other thing you're going to need is the flight controller in the back of here. As it's sat level on that particular piece of wood, you need to offset it by about 4 degrees to give you the right attitude so that it's going to fly straight and level. I only gave it 2. I initially gave it 4, and I wish I'd have kept it there. I gave it 2 because it kind of looks a bit goofy with its nose stuck up in the air, but that's where it needs to be. The centre of gravity seems spot on. There are marks on the underside of the wing, and they do seem to be in the right place, so well done AtomRC for that. The throws that I have on this, I actually changed it so that I'm not on the outside hole. I set mine up to be on the second hole. No throws in the manual. You know, that is something that AtomRC you do need to do a little bit better. So I kind of eyeballed it, and they work really good for me. I may increase that because although the roll rate is nice, I think in terms of the authority for the elevator, I might like a little bit more for some of my rolls, particularly if this is going to be an FPV combat plane, which is the plan. With the battery that was in here, the little 1300 4S, I know in the flying footage, Adam and I will comment on the fact that the amp draw seemed very low. Not completely sure that's 100% accurate, but looking at the battery after that specific flight you've just watched, I was flying for just over 5 minutes and there was tons of battery left. So pro-ratering that and playing with it afterwards, I think we could probably get about 15 minutes out of a little 1300 milliamp hour battery using the standard motor and prop supplied with the kit. And again, that's a 2000 kV motor and 5 and a bit prop, and it actually works really well. It's a lot quieter than I expected, and it just flies great. Now, am I going to change anything? Not really. The only thing I'm going to change, and you could hear it in the flying footage, is the X6R, which I've never been a massive fan of, actually. I kind of plugged it out of the spares bin and dumped it into there. I kind of forgot why I didn't like it. So I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to put a good old-fashioned X8R in its place. That will probably give me much better reception, and I won't have all those issues. I was logging the telemetry from this onto the radio while I was running the iNav Lua script, so there is some kind of data to back up how it was flying, and the maximum speed we got out of it in a straight and level flight was 79 miles an hour according to the GPS. That's usually reasonably accurate. The cruise current is incredibly low, so I'm going to keep the motor and prop combo for the moment as it is. So thank you to every single one of you that got in touch on my previous video and gave motor and prop suggestions. Those have all been documented, and in fact a couple of them are going to appear in a video in a week or two. Marcus Muller and I have been doing some more eCalc videos, and it was a great example of how to compare a couple of different setups in terms of efficiency, because surprise the lower KV larger prop is much more efficient. So thank you to everybody that offered that. We may come back and revisit it, but right now I'm going to keep it as it is here with this motor and prop combo. Last thing I'll mention is I had a couple of questions about what kind of foam I think it is. I'm not really sure, to be honest. All I can attest to is that it does survive crashes very well. Not all the launches went as well as the one that was shown, and it has bounced around the field, and it has survived absolutely fine, apart from the odd bit of muck. So I'm not exactly sure what it is, whether it's EPP, something like that. It is quite a flexible foam. Again, that needs to be in the listing at AtomRC if you're watching for any future play. But yeah, 5 pills, can't see any more than that. It's epic. If you have a chance to try one or get one, I'd definitely add this to your fleet. This is fantastic. I may take a little bit more, actually thinking about it, off here, just give a little bit more view, but actually that little bit of a cutout where the camera is works great. Right, I'm going to charge some more batteries and go back to the field. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organised into easy to follow playlists that, if you're trying to learn a topic, will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.